The adopted daughter's devastating truth. What would you do if your own daughter screamed, "You're not my real mother," in your face? How far would you go to prove that love isn't defined by blood? What you're about to hear will shock you. Are you ready? Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the like button. My name is Rebecca Martinez. I'm 48 years old, and I'm about to tell you the most heartbreaking story of my life. How my adopted daughter's cruel words led me to reveal a secret that changed everything. What happened next will absolutely shock you. For 17 years, I believed I had built the perfect family in our suburban home in Phoenix, Arizona. My husband David and I had tried for years to have children naturally, but after multiple miscarriages and failed fertility treatments, we made the decision to adopt. That's when 2-year-old Sophia came into our lives like a miracle we never knew we needed. Sophia was everything we had dreamed of: intelligent, creative, and full of life. She had these piercing green eyes and curly auburn hair that bounced when she laughed. From the moment the social worker placed her in my arms, I knew she was meant to be mine, not by blood, but by choice, by love. By every sleepless night I spent rocking her back to sleep when nightmares haunted her tiny mind, I threw myself into being the best mother I could possibly be. I volunteered for every school event, drove her to dance classes, helped with homework, and celebrated every small victory as if it were a Nobel Prize. When other parents asked about Sophia's biological family, I always deflected with a smile, saying we preferred to focus on our present rather than the past. But as Sophia entered her teenage years, something began to shift. The one sweet girl who used to curl up with me for bedtime stories became distant and rebellious. She started questioning everything: her curfew, her chores, even simple requests became battles. I told myself it was normal teenage behavior, but deep down, I sensed something more troubling brewing beneath the surface. The first real warning sign came when she was 16. I found college brochures hidden in her room, but they weren't just any colleges. They were specifically schools known for their genealogy and family history programs. When I asked her about them, she became defensive and angry, accusing me of invading her privacy. But I could see something else in her eyes, a desperate hunger for answers I had been withholding. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Tuesday in March, and Phoenix was experiencing one of those perfect spring evenings where the desert air feels like silk against your skin. I had prepared Sophia's favorite dinner, chicken enchiladas with homemade salsa verde, hoping to bridge the growing gap between us. David was working late at his law firm, so it was just the two of us at our kitchen table, the same table where she had done countless homework assignments and art projects over the years. But instead of the pleasant conversation I had hoped for, Sophia sat there picking at her food with barely contained rage simmering just beneath the surface. When I asked about her day at school, she gave me one-word answers. When I mentioned college applications, she slammed her fork down with such force that I jumped. "Why do you even care?" she snapped, her green eyes flashing with an intensity that made my blood run cold. I tried to stay calm, explaining that I cared because I was her mother and I loved her. That's when she stood up so abruptly that her chair scraped against the tile floor with a sound like nails on a chalkboard. "You're not my real mother," she screamed, her voice echoing through our kitchen. "You're just some woman who took me in because you couldn't have your own kids. You're nothing to me. Nothing." The words hit me like physical blows. In 17 years of raising this child, through tantrums and teenage attitude, she had never once thrown my lack of biological connection to her in my face. I sat there stunned, watching my daughter, the little girl who used to call me mama and bring me dandelions from the backyard, standing before me with pure hatred in her eyes. But what she said next was even worse. "I know you're hiding something from me," she continued, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I've been doing research. I know there are things about my adoption that you've never told me, and I'm going to find out the truth, with or without your help." That's when I realized the moment I had been dreading for years had finally arrived. The secret I had carried alone, the truth that I had convinced myself was too painful to share, was about to come crashing down Alma's whether I wanted it to or not. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling like jelly beneath me. Without saying a word, I walked to our home office, opened the filing cabinet I had hoped never to touch again, and pulled out a manila envelope that had remained sealed for 15 years. My hands were shaking as I returned to the kitchen where Sophia still stood, her arms crossed defiantly across her chest. I placed the envelope on the table between us like it was a bomb that might explode at any moment. In many ways, it was. "You want the truth," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Here it is. But once you know, you can never unknow it. Are you sure you're ready for that?" For the first time since her outburst began, I saw uncertainty flicker across Sophia's face. But her stubborn streak, the same trait that had helped her survive whatever trauma she had experienced before coming to us, wouldn't let her back down now. She grabbed the envelope and tore it open with trembling fingers. Inside were documents I had hidden away when she was just 2 years old. Police reports, medical records, court transcripts, and newspaper clippings that told a story too horrific for a child to ever have to know. I watched her face change as she read. The defiant anger slowly drained away, replaced by shock, then confusion, then something that looked like physical pain. When she finished reading the last document, she looked up at me with eyes that had aged years in mere minutes. This can't be real," she whispered. But it was real. Every horrible, heartbreaking detail of it. The truth was that Sophia hadn't been given up for adoption by loving parents who couldn't care for her. She had been rescued from one of the most horrific child abuse cases Phoenix had ever seen. Her biological parents, if you could even call them that, had been arrested when she was found malnourished, covered in bruises, and suffering from injuries that the medical reports described in clinical terms that couldn't begin to capture the evil inflicted on an innocent child. The newspapers had called it the House of Horrors case. Social workers had testified that in their 20-year careers, they had never seen neglect and abuse so severe. Sophia's biological mother had been sentenced to life in prison. Her biological father had died by suicide in jail while awaiting trial. I had made the decision years ago to seal away these documents because I couldn't bear the thought of my sweet, healing daughter ever knowing the depths of cruelty from which she had been saved. I wanted her to have a clean slate, a fresh start, a childhood filled with love instead of shadows from a past that would only bring her pain. But now, as I watched her processing this information, I realized that my silence had created its own kind of pain. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice breaking. The tears she had been holding back finally began to fall. I tried to explain my reasoning, that I had wanted to protect her, that I had hoped she would never need to know, that I had been terrified of how this knowledge might affect her sense of self and security. But every word felt inadequate in the face of her devastation. What I hadn't expected was what happened next. Instead of more anger, instead of accusations about my deception, Sophia collapsed into the chair and began to sob. Not the dramatic crying of a teenager who didn't get her way, but the deep, wrenching sobs of someone whose entire worldview had just shattered and reformed in the span of a few minutes. Through her tears, she began to speak. She told me about the nightmares she had been having for years, fragmented memories of dark rooms and angry voices that she had never been able to explain. She described feelings of anxiety and abandonment that seemed to come from nowhere, especially when David and I would leave her with babysitters or go out of town for work. She had always wondered why certain sounds, like shouting or doors slamming, would send her into a panic. Why she hoarded food in her bedroom even though she had never gone hungry in our house. Why she flinched when people approached her too quickly, even people she loved and trusted. Now, suddenly, it all made sense. Her body and mind had been carrying the trauma of her early years, even though her conscious memory had been too young to retain the specific details. The rebellious behavior, the searching for her roots, the anger at me for not sharing her biology, it had all been her psyche's way of trying to solve a puzzle she didn't even know existed. As I watched my daughter work through this revelation, I felt a mixture of relief and terror. Relief that the secret was finally out, that I no longer had to carry the weight of this knowledge alone, but terror about what it might mean for our relationship going forward. Would she be grateful that David and I had saved her from that nightmare? Would she understand why I had chosen silence? Or would she feel betrayed by my deception? Angry that I had made these decisions about her life without including her in them? The answer came slowly over the following weeks and months. Sophia threw herself into therapy, working with a counselor who specialized in childhood trauma and adoption issues. She began to understand that her anger toward me hadn't really been about biology or secrets. It had been about feeling disconnected from her own story, unable to make sense of emotions and reactions that seemed to come from nowhere. Gradually, our relationship began to heal in ways I had never thought possible. The revelation that had threatened to destroy us ultimately brought us closer together. Sophia began to see that love isn't about sharing DNA. It's about choosing to show up day after day, even when things get difficult. It's about staying when others leave, about fighting for someone even when they're fighting against you. She also began to understand something that broke my heart in the most beautiful way possible. She realized that David and I hadn't just adopted a child. We had rescued her from a hell that could have destroyed her completely. We had given her not just a home and a family, but literally a chance at life itself. The woman who stood before me screaming, "You're not my real mother," was the same woman who, 6 months later, asked if she could legally change her last name to match ours, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She wanted to make official what had always been true in our hearts. Today, Sophia is in college studying social work, inspired by her own experience to help other children who have survived trauma. She speaks openly about her adoption story and the importance of both honesty and timing when it comes to sharing difficult truths with children. Our relationship isn't perfect. No parent-child relationship ever is, but it's real, and it's built on a foundation of truth rather than well-intentioned deception. She knows now that when I said I loved her, I meant it with every fiber of my being, and I know that when she calls me mom, she's choosing that title rather than simply accepting it. The secret that I thought would destroy our family ultimately saved it. Sometimes the truth we're most afraid to tell is exactly the truth that needs to be heard. So I have to ask you, if you were in my position, would you have told your child the truth from the beginning, even knowing how much it would hurt them? Or would you have done what I did and tried to protect them from a past they couldn't change? And when your own child screams that you're not their real parent, how do you prove that love makes families, not genetics? Let me know in the comments, because I'd love to hear how you would have handled this impossible situation.